Cnut the Great, more commonly known as Cnut, was a king of Denmark, England, Norway and parts of Sweden, together often referred to as the Anglo-Scandinavian or North Sea Empire. After his death, the deaths of his heirs within a decade, and the Norman conquest of England in 1066, his legacy was largely lost to history. Historian Norman Cantor has made the statement that he was the most effective king in Anglo-Saxon history. Although Cnut himself was not Anglo-Saxon, Cnut's name is popularly invoked in the context of the legendary story of King Cnut and the waves, but usually misrepresenting Cnut as a deluded monarch believing he had supernatural powers, when the original story in fact relates the opposite and portrays a wise king. Cnut's father was Sweyn Forkbeard, king of Denmark. The identity of his mother is uncertain, although medieval tradition makes her a daughter of Musco I. As a prince of Denmark, Cnut won the throne of England in 1016 in the wake of centuries of Viking activity in northwestern Europe. His accession to the Danish throne in 1018 brought the crowns of England and Denmark together. Cnut maintained his power by uniting Danes and English under cultural bonds of wealth and custom, rather than by sheer brutality. After a decade of conflict with opponents in Scandinavia, Cnut claimed the crown of Norway in Trondheim in 1028. The Swedish city Sigtuna was held by Cnut. He had coins struck there that called him king, but there is no narrative record of his occupation. The kingship of England lent the Danes an important link to the maritime zone between the islands of Great Britain and Ireland, where Cnut, like his father before him, had a strong interest and wielded much influence among the Norse Gaels. Cnut's possession of England's dioceses and the continental diocese of Denmark, with a claim laid upon it by the Holy Roman Empire's Archdiocese of Hamburg-Bremen, was a source of great leverage within the Catholic Church, gaining notable concessions from Pope Benedict VIII and his successor John XIX, such as one on the price of the pallium of his bishops. Cnut also gained concessions on the tolls his people had to pay on the way to Rome from other magnates of medieval Christendom. At the coronation of the Holy Roman Emperor, after his 1026 victory against Norway and Sweden, and on his way to Rome for this coronation, Cnut, in a letter written for the benefit of his subjects, stated himself king of all England and Denmark and the Norwegians and of some of the Swedes. The Anglo-Saxon kings used the title King of the English. Cnut was Illa Ingla lands sinning, King of all England, birth and kingship. Cnut was a son of the Danish prince Sweyn Forkbeard, who was the son and heir to King Harald Bluetooth from a line of Scandinavian rulers central to the unification of Denmark. Neither the place nor the date of his birth are known. Cnut was the semi-legendary founder of the Danish royal house at the beginning of the 10th century, and his son, Gorm the Old, was the first in the official line. Harald Bluetooth, Gorm's son and Cnut's grandfather, was the Danish king at the time of the Christianization of Denmark, the first Scandinavian king to accept Christianity. Cnut's grandfather died when he was 2 years old and his father, Sweyn Forkbeard, became king. The Chronicon of Thietmar of Mertzburg and the Encomium Emma reports Cnut's mother as having been a daughter of Musco I of Poland. Norse sources of the High Middle Ages, most prominently Heimskringla by Snorre Sturluson, also give a Polish princess as a Cnut's mother, whom they call Gunhild and a daughter of Bur-Eiliv, the king of England. Since in the Norse sagas the king of England is always Bur-Eiliv, this is reconcilable with the assumption that her father was Musco. Adam of Bremen in Gesta Hammerbergensis Ecclesia Pontificum is unique in equating Cnut's mother with the former Queen of Sweden, wife of Eric the Victorious and by this marriage mother of Olaf Skart Konung. To complicate the matter, Heimskringla and other sagas also have Sweyn marrying Eric's widow, but she is distinctly another person in these texts. by name of Sigrid the Haughty, whom Sweyn only marries after Gunhild, the Slavic princess who bore Cnut, has died. Different theories regarding the number and ancestry of Sweyn's wives have been brought forward, but since Adam is the only source to equate the identity of Cnut's and Olafsgard Konung's mother, this is often seen as an error of Adam, and it is often assumed that Sweyn had two wives, the first being Cnut's mother, and the second being the former Queen of Sweden. Cnut's brother Harald was the firstborn and crown prince. Some hint of Cnut's childhood can be found in the Flat-eyed Jarbok, a 13th-century source, stating at one point that Cnut was taught his soldiery by the chieftain Thorkel the Tall, brother to Sigurd, Jarl of mythical Jomsborg, and the legendary Joms, at their Viking stronghold on the island of Wollin, off the coast of Pomerania. His date of birth, like his mother's name, is unknown. Contemporary works such as the Chronicon and the Encomium Emma do not mention it. Even so, in a Nuttrapper by the Skaldottar there is a statement that Cnut was of no great age when he first went to war. It also mentions a battle identifiable with Sweyn Forkbeard's invasion of England and attack on the city of Norwich in 1003-04, after the St. Brice's Day massacre of Danes by the English, in 1002. If it is the case that Cnut was part of this, his birth date may be near 990, or even 980. If not, and the Skald's poetic verse envisages another assault, such as Forkbeard's conquest of England in 1013-14, it may even suggest a birth date nearer 1000. There is a passage of the Encomiasts with a reference to the force Cnut led in his English conquest of 1015-16. Here it says all the Vikings were of mature age under Cnut, the king. A description of Cnut can be found within the 13th century Neatlinger saga. Cnut was exceptionally tall and strong, and the handsomest of men, all except for his nose, that was thin, high-set, and rather hooked. He had a fair complexion nonetheless, and a fine, thick head of hair. His eyes were better than those of other men, both the handsomer and the keener of their sight. Neatlinger saga. Hardly anything is known for sure of Cnut's life until the year he was part of a Scandinavian force under his father, King Sweyn, in his invasion of England in summer 1013. It was the climax to a succession of Viking raids spread over a number of decades. With their landing in the Humber, the kingdom fell to the Vikings quickly, and near the end of the year King Ethelred fled to Normandy, leaving Sweyn Forkbeard in possession of England. In the winter, Forkbeard was in the process of consolidating his kingship, with Cnut left in charge of the fleet and the base of the army at Gainsborough. On the death of Sweyn Forkbeard after a few months as king, on Candlemas Sunday 3 February 1014, Harold succeeded him as King of Denmark, while Cnut was immediately elected king by the Vikings and the people of the Danelaw. However, the English nobility took a different view, and the White Nagemot recalled Ethelred from Normandy. The restored king swiftly led an army against Cnut, who fled with his army to Denmark, along the way mutilating the hostages they had taken and abandoning them on the beach at Sandwich. Cnut went to Harold and supposedly made the suggestion they might have a joint kingship, although this found no favor with his brother. Harold is thought to have offered Cnut command of his forces for another invasion of England, on the condition he did not continue to press his claim. In any case, Cnut was able to assemble a large fleet with which to launch another invasion. Conquest of England. Among the allies of Denmark was Boleslaw the Brave, the Duke of Poland and a relative to the Danish royal house. He lent some Polish troops, likely to have been a pledge made to Cnut and Harold when, in the winter, they went amongst the Wends to fetch their mother back to the Danish court. She had been sent away by their father after the death of the Swedish king Erik the Victorious in 995, and his marriage to Sigrid the Haughty. The Swedish queen mother, This wedlock formed a strong alliance between the successor to the throne of Sweden, Olaf Skart Konung, and the rulers of Denmark, his in-laws. Swedes were certainly among the allies in the English conquest. Another in-law to the Danish royal house, Erik Hakonison, was Trond Jarl, the co-ruler of Norway, with his brother Sven Hakonison, Norway having been under Danish sovereignty since the Battle of Svolder, in 999. Erik's participation in the invasion left his son Hakon to rule Norway, with Sven. In the summer of 1015, Cnut's fleet set sail for England with a Danish army of perhaps 10,200 longships. Cnut was at the head of an array of Vikings from all over Scandinavia. The invasion force was to engage in often close and grisly warfare with the English for the next 14 months. Practically all of the battles were fought against the eldest son of Ethelred, Edmund Ironside. Landing in Wessex according to the Peterborough manuscript of the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, early in September 1015, Cnut came into Sandwich, and straightway sailed around Kent to Wessex, until he came to the mouth of the Frome, and harried in Dorset and Wiltshire and Somerset, beginning a campaign of an intensity not seen since the days of Alfred the Great. A passage from Emma's encomium provides a picture of Cnut's fleet. Here were so many kinds of shields, that you could have believed that troops of all nations were present. Gold shone on the prows, silver also flashed on the variously shaped ships. For who could look upon the lions of the foe, terrible with the brightness of gold, who upon the men of metal, menacing with golden face, who upon the bulls on the ships threatening death, their horns shining with gold, without feeling any fear for the king of such a force. Furthermore, in this great expedition there was present no slave, no man freed from slavery, no low-born man, no man weakened by age, for all were noble, all strong with the might of mature age, all sufficiently fit for any type of fighting, all of such great fleetness, that they scorned the speed of horsemen. Encomium Emma Regina Wessex, long ruled by the dynasty of Alfred and Ethelred, submitted to Cnut late in 1015, as it had to his father 2 years earlier. At this point Edric Striana, the ealdorman of Mercia, deserted Ethelred together with 40 ships and their crews and joined forces with Cnut. Another defector was Thorkel the Tall, a Jomsviking chief who had fought against the Viking invasion of Sweyn Forkbeard, with a pledge of allegiance to the English in 1012. Some explanation for this shift of allegiance may be found in a stanza of the Jomsvikinga saga, that mentions 2 attacks against Jomsborg's mercenaries while they were in England, with a man known as Henninga, a brother of Thorkel, among their casualties. If the Flat-Eye Jarbok is correct that this man was Cnut's childhood mentor, it explains his acceptance of his allegiance, with Jom Vikings ultimately in the service of Jomsborg. The 40 ships Edric came with, often thought to be of the Danelaw, were probably Thorkel's. Advance into the north early in 1016, the Vikings crossed the Thames and harried Warwickshire, while Edmund Ironside's attempts at opposition seem to have come to nothing. The chronicler says the English army disbanded because the king and the citizenry of London were not present. The midwinter assault by Cnut devastated its way northwards across eastern Mercia. Another summons of the army brought the Englishmen together, and they were met, this time by the king, although it came to nothing as so often before, and Ethelred returned to London with fears of betrayal. Edmund then went north to join Uhtred the Earl of Northumbria, and together they harried Staffordshire, Shropshire and Cheshire in western Mercia, possibly targeting the estates of Edric Striana. Cnut's occupation of Northumbria meant Uhtred returned home to submit himself to Cnut, who seems to have sent a Northumbrian rival, Thurbrand the Hold, to massacre Uhtred and his retinue. Erik Hakonison, most likely with another force of Scandinavians, came to support Cnut at this point, and the veteran Norwegian Jarl was put in charge of Northumbria. Edmund remained in London, still unsubdued behind its famous walls, and was elected king after the death of Ethelred on 23 April 1016. Siege of London. Cnut returned southward and the Danish army evidently divided, some dealing with Edmund, who had broken out of London before Cnut's encirclement of the city was complete, and gone to gather an army in Wessex, the traditional heartland of the English monarchy, some besieging London, with the construction of dikes on the northern and southern flanks and a channel dug across the banks of the Thames to the south of the city for the longships to cut off communications upriver. There was a battle fought at Penselwood in Somerset, with a hill in Selwood Forest as the likely location, and a subsequent battle at Shurston, in Wiltshire, which was fought over 2 days but left neither side victorious. Edmund was able to temporarily relieve London, driving the enemy away, and defeating them after crossing the Thames at Brentford. Suffering heavy losses, he withdrew to Wessex to gather fresh troops, and the Danes again brought London under siege. But after another unsuccessful assault they withdrew into Kent under attack by the English, with a battle fought at Otford. At this point Edric Striana went over to Edmund, and Cnut set sail northwards across the Thames estuary to Essex, and went from the landing of the ships up the River Orwell to ravage Mercia. London captured by treaty on 18 October 1016, the Danes were engaged by Edmund's army as they retired towards their ships, leading to the Battle of Assanduns, fought at either Ashington, in southeast, or Ashton, in northwest Essex. In the ensuing struggle, Edric Striana, whose return to the English side had perhaps only been a ruse, withdrew his forces from the fray, bringing about a decisive English defeat. Edmund fled westwards, and Cnut pursued him into Gloucestershire, with another battle probably fought near the Forest of Dean, for Edmund had an alliance with some of the Welsh. On an island near Deerhurst, Cnut and Edmund, who had been wounded, met to negotiate terms of peace. It was agreed that all of England north of the Thames was to be the domain of the Danish prince, while all to the south was kept by the English king, along with London. Accession to the reign of the entire realm was set to pass to Cnut upon Edmund's death. Edmund died on 30 November, within weeks of the agreement. Some sources claim Edmund was murdered, although the circumstances of his death are unknown. In accord with the treaty, Cnut was left as king of all of England. His coronation was in London, at Christmas, with recognition by the nobility in January the next year at Oxford.